press the record button and say good day to everyone. It's Lawrence Houghton, and today talking with Bonnie Hall, and the topic that we're talking about is storytelling, with a goal of how to tell better stories and how to get a lot more buy-in from your teams. This is going to be lesson 1, telling your story as the foundation for how to tell any story. But let me tell you a story why telling stories became the most incredible discovery made in my 30+ years of working with business people. When we did the first book, It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, It's the Fast That Eat the Slow, nobody expected it to do very much. Matter of fact, the publisher said, if you sell 3,000 copies, that'll be great. Most business books don't even sell 3,000 copies. And when it sold 60,000 copies in the first 6 weeks and over 100,000 copies in the first few months, we were thrilled. And like all business people, when you have a big event happen, you try to figure out why. Why'd this happen? Looking for a pat on the back, but then also looking for some things that you would do again to make a good thing happen a second time. So we asked, and everybody that we talked to, what did you like? What stood out? What do you remember? And what was the big discovery was it wasn't the cleverness of a title like It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, It's the Fast That Eat the Slow, which is a story unto itself, I have to tell you. It's a good one. You'll never guess. But it's not the chapter titles. It wasn't the unconventional thinking that went in. At the time, people said, you can't be faster. I mean, my God, believe it or not, they said this in 1999 and 2000. We're already working as fast as we can. But it wasn't the unconventional. It wasn't the way that we attacked it, with a lot of practical things that people could put to work. It wasn't any of the things that you'd think as a writer or as a communicator, these are the things that people are going to notice and remember. Research, numbers, did not matter. Every single one of them, every single person we asked said the same thing. Ooh, what I really liked was, you told this story. I remember this situation. I remember these words from this person in their story. It was story, 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 story. And that was the big discovery. Being brilliant, being unconventional, being a wordsmith, being a presenter, none of it mattered anywhere near as much as being able to convert whatever it is that was a big discovery into a great story. Some stories were 1 sentence long, and people said, my favorite part of the whole book, this 1 sentence. And it was a story about a person, and in 1 sentence, they told the whole story, and they just remembered it and were thrilled by it. So what we did was, we said, that's the process we're going to use for all the remaining work to be done. And now that we know that, how do you tell stories? How do you find stories? How do you create stories? How do you make them impactful and enchanting and magnetic and everything that you want to make a story into? And that's when we figured out we have to get into the school of hard knocks and start writing and producing and creating stories, and then learning the lessons, not from business storytellers, but rather the lessons from real storytellers, screenwriters, brilliant novelists, poets, songwriters. These people, the great people that you can think the names of, many of them have sat down and said, as if they were addressing a group of students, let me tell you something about telling a story. Let me tell you something about saying something memorable. Let me tell you something about how to do this. They're really very generous, but it is so much better that we were listening to them. So what we're going to cover off in this series is going to be anything and everything that I learned and other people have told me and I've been taught that matters, that changes your ability to tell a great story and to get the impact that you want. And where we're going to be drawing our lessons from is we're going to be drawing our lessons from real storytellers. So they aren't anybody that's on LinkedIn. You're not going to see them at a business conference. No, 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 no. Comedians, screenwriters, actors, poets, songwriters. Their lessons. Those are the lessons that when you put them to work, storytelling becomes truly a competitive advantage and a unique strength that you have as a leader. So today, with Bonnie here, we're going to talk about lesson 1, because where it all begins is you got to be able to tell your story. So, hi, Bonnie.
Hello.
Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
You listened to a podcast of Jason's.
Yes.
And that podcast was about?
Points of difference.
The points of difference.
Points of difference, which are really our competitive advantage as people, as individuals. When we're trying to sell ourselves, that's what our points of difference are.
Okay. And so the points of difference are something you're saying to present yourself to a business person, a business group, an employee. It could be whoever it is that you're trying to introduce yourself to, friends, neighbors. Yeah. It's a way of introducing yourself. That's what you got out of the podcast, right? That was your points of difference. Correct.
It's like an elevator, like a little bit of an elevator introduction or an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
But it's a way of creating credibility and giving someone a very quick snapshot of who we are as people or as business people or whatever, in a very concise way, but in a way that the communication sticks.
Now that's a lot of interesting choices of words, because people introduce themselves all the time. As a matter of fact, the people that popularized the idea of the elevator pitch were basically in a business conference trying to explain to people this way of introducing yourself. And what I pulled from all of that work that's been done is that it hasn't been very effective. Now, how do I say it hasn't been very effective? Most of the people I see introduce themselves are doing a job that's very mediocre. It's not going to be memorable. It's really not all that interesting. It certainly doesn't, what you used the words earlier, sell me on them. What did you hear in the podcast that that got you interested in trying to develop your own points of difference?
Jason talked about the magic phrase, which was, and let me tell you what this means to you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, I think when we're trying to introduce ourselves or we're trying to establish credibility, we often tend to talk about me. I've done this, I've done that, I've done that. By 20 seconds in, the other person's eyes are rolling back in their head and they've departed mentally and they're somewhere else. They're not even listening at all to what's being said. So what Jason had indicated in the podcast was that we talk about, say we're trying to establish a point of difference around topic X. We tell a quick story, a little something about ourselves, and then always bring it back to the other person by saying, and let me tell you what this means to you. So that the person can make that connection to the story or the point of difference, and then the relevance to themselves.
Okay, and you're trying to make yourself stand out as being different from everybody else that they've stumbled across during their business life or during their personal life, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah. And so it needs to be something that's different about you. And it also, how many points did he say that you needed to develop?
He said that we shouldn't have more than 3 or 4,
Mhm.
or potentially maybe 5. But that in an introduction, we would only ever use 3.
And why do you
So,
think that you would only use 3?
um, because I think that one, if you're giving one point of difference, although it's helpful, it doesn't provide a very comprehensive picture. It's just one piece of who we are as a person or a business person. If you provide 2 or 3, then it gives the listener a really comprehensive view of who we are. And it also allows that person to see different facets. So where one point of difference may not be relevant to them as, a person or them in their business, by the time you've done 3, they should have a pretty good idea of who you are and what you bring to the table.
Did he give you any hints about how much time to take to do something like this?
I don't honestly remember I don't think he said a specific time, but it should be short. And we talked about elevator pitches earlier, which are kind of silly term because, it doesn't really make any sense, this elevator pitch concept. But that it should be very concise, that every word matters, that you get right to the point. And then you always bring it back to the person to say, and let me tell you what this means to you.
Well, I think he mentioned that in another podcast down the way. And Bonnie has not only listened to all the podcasts and gone through them, but she's made comprehensive notes. So you'll remember at some point he said, as he repeated it to me, what's in this for me? Or in other words, to be interesting, to be compelling, you have to convey the message, what's in it for me. But yeah, am I characterizing that right? Were those the kinds of words he used? Not in
As
this podcast, but in another one.
you mean to the audience
Yeah,
or to the listener?
to the listener.
Yes.
In other words, when you're talking, you're always thinking, telling them what's in it for them,
Correct.
not what's in it for you or what's in
Correct.
it for the globe or what's in it for posterity, but what's in it for me? What's in it for me being them, the listener?
Correct. So
Okay.
he gave an example in the Points of Difference podcast. He gave a really great example where he's trying to, say, reach a CEO to do an interview, and he talked about his own points of difference of being a researcher. And let me tell you what that means to you, Mr. CEO. It means that it will be fact-based, it will be research-based, it will be credible, this kind of thing. So he talked about when he was trying to reach CEOs and get them to devote their time to interviews, he would use his points of difference as ways of convincing the CEO that the time was worthwhile.
Sure.
And it really intrigued me because my own personal area of expertise is sales. I love sales and business development.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with big sales teams. And what I find is that salespeople tend to want to, especially junior salespeople, want to tell you everything about the product. And it has this, and it has this, and it has this shiny thing, and it has that. And they often don't take the feature, that's all the features. They'll give you a download of the features without then taking the benefit and saying, and the benefit of this to you is this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the critical piece. But I hadn't heard points of difference in the way that he described it. It was so concise, and it brought in what you said at the very beginning, which is this whole idea of storytelling. It's this idea of the story is what makes the communication stick. And I think that's where the magic is, and also those exact words, let me tell you what this means to you. So just in case the listener has missed that, what it means, you're kind of underscoring it, but not in a patronizing way, not in a disrespectful way, but in a very, Lawrence, let me tell you what this means to you. I want to make sure that you understand that I've crafted this just for you. And it's really important to me that you understand that I'm doing this for you. I've taken the time. It's respectful. I've taken the time to think about what you like, Lawrence, and I'm going to make sure that the things that I tell you about myself are relevant to you. They're not just, you know, me sounding off and trying to make myself look important, or trying to make myself a big list of all the things I've done. No, it's what's relevant to you.
Yes.
And that's what I think, that's where I think the magic of the way that the point of difference has been conveyed. And then, of course, always the story, right?
So the big goals, the objectives of this points of difference, you've mentioned the first one was to be relevant.
Yes.
And that is relevant, you could say, to the individual. Some people have actually said to me, I have a different point of difference presentation for everybody that I talk to. That's really wonderful. And it's really terrible, because as we're going to discover as we go through this, it's hard enough to come up with 3 that are just gems,
Wow.
that are just wow. Yeah. So now the person that starts to say, well, I change this for every person I talk to, gets into that rut of saying, well, I ad lib it. And as I have watched people when they're ad libbing in their head, they think, well, I'm Jerry Seinfeld. I'm really good at this. And in practice, they're Bud. They're really terrible at it. So it's hard enough. If you can get to 3, that is necessary. And if you can get to 5, that should be done in such a way, and we're going to work on it in such a way that it covers 99.9% of all people. And so you're going to be fine with no more than 3 at the absolute top, with 5. But the other thing that you mentioned in terms of goals for this is it has to establish credibility. And then there's one other thing, I think, that as a salesperson you want it, as a leader you want it, and as a communicator you want it. And that's desirability, right?
Yes.
You want people to want you.
Yes. What a magic word desirability is,
Yeah.
right? Who doesn't want to be desired?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. And so if with those things as our beacon that we're staring at as we go to the presentation of this, with those really clear beacons, we get a clearer path towards making it work. And that's why we invest the time right now to be absolutely crystal clear that what we create, what we present to people, must always be relevant. It must, and when I say establish credibility, I mean it must not state credibility, but rather prove credibility. You know, like we did all those years in marketing where we said, don't say it, prove it.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It's got to be the
100%.
same in this.
Yes.
And then the most important of them all, the relevance is important, credibility, very important. These are the top 3. But my goodness, to be desirable, to have somebody say, I want to hang around with you. I want to follow you. I want to listen to you. I like you. This is what we're trying to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think people want to, and I know you went in the order of credible, relevant, and then desirable. And not to get too far down this path, but I honestly think that sometimes people just make decisions based on what they like. And then if you're also if you're desirable, they like you, but you're also credible and relevant, boom, you've got the magic, hat trick there. Sorry to use the Canadian hockey phrase, but there you go. I had to work that in.
Yeah, well, we did. By the way, since we haven't mentioned it before, but I'm in California. Bonnie is in the Toronto area. And so, yes, she's part of our, she's one of our neighbors to the north. And and very Canadian. You'll hear her say sorry more than once as we go through this presentation. She just did a second ago. Now, this idea, you said people buy from people they like, people follow people they like, people listen to people they like. I only want to emphasize that or get it from your perspective because you did Dow Chemical and other high-level pharmaceutical sales to professionals in pharmacy, in medicine, in terms of hospitals and doctors and insurance plans and actuarials and everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we call professional buying situations. And what's important is, and the reason I'm asking you this, is because a lot of people say, well, that's fine if you're at the car dealership, and that's fine at the nursery, but we're in the professional business. We are selling software to large organizations, and my God, people aren't thinking who they like. They're making a hard business decision. They're running the numbers. They're looking at features, and they don't need any of this stuff that you're talking about. And I would say to them, you're crazy, but I don't want to because maybe I'm wrong. What would you say to them in the area of pharmaceutical sales to professionals and to serious scientific professionals in your experience? How much do they choose people they like versus all the numbers and all the other razzle dazzle?
Well, in my own experience, people are not going to work with you just because they like you if you don't have the other stuff. Mm-hmm. So you've got to have a credible product. You've got to have all of that. But most markets are pretty crowded. And so if all those other things are equal or similar, let's say equal or similar, your product has a similar benefit, the data is similar, cost analysis is similar, then likability, desirability absolutely factors in, because people are people. Whether you're a doctor or a pharmacist, whether you're an insurance person, I mean, people just like to work with people that make them feel good, that they have fun with, that they enjoy. And if you can work over here and have all three of those things, remember the hat trick, the credibility, reliability, and the desirability, or you can work over here with someone who's kind of sour, and who are you going to pick? Most people would pick the people that they're attracted to, that are desirable and likable. And I would actually come even further back in the process, which is likability is important just for getting in the door sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't even get in the door if you're not likable. They'll just shut the door. I mean, at very sort of entry level pharma sales, you have to get past the receptionist or past the nurse to get to the doctor who writes the prescription. Now, this is entry level, but if you're not likable, I'm telling you that receptionist is not letting you in the door. So likability is actually the first thing before credibility, before relevance, before any of that. So it's important to say that it doesn't factor in any kind of a business or even a life situation. Is, I think, a little bit short-sighted if people think that way.
Yeah, there really isn't. You can't find supporting evidence. You can only find somebody who finds being likable too hard, who then excuses it by saying it doesn't really matter. And you won't find it anywhere, anecdotally or in scientific studies. But the reason I bring it up is because of the next section, because while we're figuring out how to tell a story, and while we're figuring out how to create these points of difference for ourselves that are desirable, there are things that we can do that make us undesirable. They make us irrelevant. They make us unlikable. They make us sound like we're same old, same old. There are things that we can do. And over the years, I've been instructed by a number of people to really look beyond the facade of poor storytelling, look beyond the facade of poor communications. And the facade of poor communications and poor storytelling is, well, it's just that individual doesn't care, is not good, and doesn't care to become good. And what they've said to me was, they said, you really have to look at the environment, not the genetics, but rather not the nature, but the nurture. What's in the environment? And the thing that happens to us is we get in our environment a lot of things where we're shown by other people who seem to be higher level professionals and communicators, and they show us ways of going about it that really turn people off. I mean, the biggest thing is that they make your eyes roll when you're listening to them. And I think we've all been in situations where we've sat, whether it's in a church or in a school, when the principal was giving a long speech, or even in business conferences, where we've just said, this is not. I may not know exactly how to create good communication, but whatever it is, this ain't it.
This is not it. Yeah.
This is not it. So what I want to talk about first, because I'd like to get your thoughts on that rather than just listen to mine. When you are talking about you, when you're listening to somebody talk about themselves, okay, because that's what points of difference are, they're you. What would you say are the big don't do this, the no, 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 the red flags, the things that are going to make you undesirable, not credible, not relevant? What would you list off as the things that would be your pet peeves when people are talking and thinking that they're hitting all the right notes and they're hitting nothing but clunkers?
I think the biggest thing for me is when people are using really fancy language.
Okay.
I'll sometimes call it gobbledygook. And as you know, I don't really typically read a lot of business books because I find that they're just chock-a-block full of gobbledygook, fancy language, phrases, acronyms. And often I find that when people are talking about themselves and using that kind of language, it's in an effort to make themselves seem smart or to seem important. And so they're trying to impress. And that's the objective. It comes across to me as fake, inauthentic. If I have to struggle to even understand what you're saying, like what does that phrase mean? I think that I feel like they're trying to hide something almost, or to try to create something that's not true. So I feel like that fancy language for me is a major turnoff. I really prefer people to get to the point, speak directly, and show me who you are. Mm-hmm. And I'll make a decision on whether I like you or not, whether you're credible or whether you're relevant. But I can tell you, and I've interviewed and hired hundreds of people in my career. If someone came in with that sort of self-important, fancy talk, it was an instant big X for me. And that resume went into the garbage.
Okay, now there's a perfect example. As we listen to people and as we go through the list of people that do a lot of talking, you're going to find that they're using the fancy language, the schmancy discussion. They're looking to sound bigger and more important than they could ever be. They are using one of the books I keep on my desk is just a book of English usage. And it's written by some hard-nosed people, and they refer to it as officialese, or in other words, these are the words. These are the words that are used by bureaucrats when they're bureaucrating. and making themselves unintelligible to others. Now, I see that as being something that we hear other people do, and we think, well, that's the way you do it. And what you're saying is, no, those are the things that we want to wring out and really reduce in whatever is our points of differences. We want the simplest, clearest, most evocative language we can that everybody can grasp. We don't have to make it. In other words, if you were talking to doctors, you wouldn't necessarily put on airs as if you had scientific knowledge beyond their ability to comprehend.
No, no, absolutely not. And in my experience, and I've worked with a lot of very, very accomplished physicians and scientists. I'm a scientist myself. They're turned off by that language. They don't. They don't need to impress, and they don't need other people to try to impress them. They just want to get to the point. Usually, most people. And I think, again, my experience is the more authentic a person is, the more qualified they are, the less they have to try to prove to you how wonderful they are.
So one of the things we're going to do in this is we're going to wring out that kind of language. Now, another thing that that people are times that you were hinting to, and what you were saying before, is they're trying to dazzle you.
Yeah.
And
and that feeling that, because people now are very, I think the BS meters that we have as people are good. So we know if someone's trying to dazzle us, and we think, what are you trying to hide? If you're not enough just who you are, and you have to create this, like, the great and powerful Oz, this illusion of who you are, then what are you trying to hide? Or is it all just an empty shell? So it rings of an inauthenticity.
So it strikes people as being fake, and that's no good. What else would you say are the turnoffs in when you're putting together a presentation? What else do you want to get rid of? What else have you noticed that people do that just drive you up the wall?
Well, this is again me getting right to the point, but boring. If someone tells you a big long story that it's just boring, so many words, and it goes on and on, you're like, just get to the point already. What are you trying to say? Just get to it. So one is fancy language, and the other is when they just take so long to make their point, or they go off on all these tangents where it's so boring that honestly, you're not listening anymore. And I think that certainly the younger generation, the millennials, I see this with my teenage daughters, their attention spans, they're short. Like, you got to get right to it because they're on to the next thing.
Okay. So you got to wring out the boring. You mentioned earlier that somebody sounds fake. And so anything that would come across as making you sound inauthentic would be, even if you've heard every politician on the planet do it, every newscaster do it, it doesn't mean it's good. It means that they're screwing up because they're looking inauthentic when they do it. So fake is something that has to be wrung out.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned bureaucratic language, officialese before, and this is why people, I believe, don't trust a lot of what politicians say, because they all speak in that kind of couched way, or many of them do. I mean, I'll use another Canadian example, but we had a mayor here in Toronto by the name of Rob Ford, and he sadly passed away now, but he had sort of international, recognition at one point. And love him or don't love him, but the people here, for the most part, loved him because he literally just said it. He just told you like it was, straight out. He really got to the point, and people like that. Now, lots of other stuff didn't work with Rob Ford, but he consistently got into office because he was a straight shooter.
Okay, so that would be another thing. And if I may, I just have two things that I put on the list every time I'm talking with someone, things I've noticed in myself, things I've noticed in others, things that I try and wring out of any presentation. One is anything that makes it forgettable, because what we want to be, as you said earlier, you want this to be remembered down the road. So anything that is forgettable. And the last thing is, while this is points of difference, while this is about you, and it will be exactly about you, while all those things are true, the way that some people try to make themselves sound different and make themselves sound unique is they play one note over and over and over and over again. We made actually a comment in one of the books. We just pulled a line from Bette Midler when she was in Beaches, and she said something to the effect of, well, enough me talking about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? And that was the key line of the most boring, monotonous, fake, and forgettable sound in all of presentations, which is that one note, me, 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 me. So when I go through the process of creating points of difference and helping people create the points of difference, which I've done a lot for their own presentations, while we are talking about you, you don't always have to be the hero. You don't have to be the knight in shining armor. You don't have to be the big shot. A lot of times by taking a back seat, you get people to say, no, 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 that's not typical. You are special. You are unique. And it's a much faster route to difference than the route of saying, well, as I saw one of the presenters on LinkedIn not that long ago talking about a fact that they were so very much humbled because they had the opportunity and really enjoyed the opportunity to share the stage with Michelle Obama. Well, you just rolled your eyes. Everybody that listens to it rolls their eyes because that is a humble brag.
Yeah.
She doesn't even have any idea who this person is. That's how impactful they were. And they were, by the way, on a riser, because I saw a picture of it. It wasn't a stage. I know what a stage looks like. I've been to Carnegie Hall. And they were looking to exalt themselves. And by doing that, they actually diminished themselves. They made themselves sound like a goof to me and to others that are listening.
And it comes across as inauthentic.
It comes across as inauthentic.
Inauthentic. Right. And people can sniff that out, I think, now, just right away.
So with these things, the gobbledygook, the dazzling people with your awesomeness, with saying anything that doesn't get straight to the point, because it's, as you go off on those tangents, you start to bore people. They're checking their iPhone. They're checking what time is it. They're doing all of those sorts of things. Anything that would come across, even though you don't mean to be fake, but done by a person in such a way that it makes you sound fake, forgettable, and of course, so egotistical that with the me, 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 me in everything that you do, and throwing in the humble brags every time you're talking. These are all things that will destroy what it is that you're trying to do in your points of difference. And that's why we go over these points clearly, because we want to separate those things out. We want to, that's the chaff. That's not the wheat. Got to go. Makes a lousy loaf of bread when you throw in the sticks and stones and the rest of the chaff. Got to go. Got to get that out. So now, when Bonnie came to me, she said, "Look, I could use some help," and that's where this conversation came from. Is I could use some help figuring out the points of difference. I need some help to craft them. Can you help me? And I said, actually, I think I can, because over the years, a number of people have had difficulty with this. It's not easy. We just make it look easy when we're done, because that's just part of being interesting.
Yeah.
We make it look like it's nothing.
Yeah.
but it's a lot of work.
But don't you find that's true about anyone who's really good at something? A great comedian, a great dancer, a great athlete, they make it look easy.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it.
And that's the magic of it.
Yeah. I know when I started, I listened to the podcast and then I made a few jot notes about how I would do points of difference because I liked all the pieces we talked about. I found it was much harder to do than met the eye.
Yeah. And so you don't have to feel diminished by the fact that this is difficult. The first time I did it, it took a long, long time. And as I was watching people after they listened to Jason, they were enthralled with what he had to say about points of difference. And I would go back and say, well, let's, come on, stand up, do it. I want to hear some points of difference. Oh. And they would go and they'd fumble through something and what I mean to say, and it would be nothing. And I would say, ugh, why aren't you working at this? And then I said, ooh, maybe because it's hard. Maybe what I should do instead of saying, ugh, is I should help them. And so we would spend literally hours together finding the points of difference. Everybody had them and everybody was compelling. Crafting them and making them sound extemporaneous. We did all of that. But once we did that, and saw the effect of that, I saw more people using it and more people writing emails back to me. Oh, I just had to give a presentation to a large group of business people. I used my points of difference to introduce myself. And I actually saw people elbowing other people saying, ooh, she's good. And they were so thrilled that this little thing worked for them. So when Jason laid it out originally, and I think he probably did this in that podcast, check me if I'm wrong, is he said, I have a simple formula for your points of difference. I want you to answer three questions. Question number one, what happened? Question number two, what did I learn from that? And question number three, the big one that you talked about earlier, what does that mean to you? And he said, if you take those three elements, you will create incredible points of difference. You will deliver them in a way that grabs people's attention and makes you desirable, and it will be memorable. So those were the three elements that he said you had to do. Does that jive with what it is that you remember from the podcast?
I don't remember him talking about those three pieces the way that you described it. So actually, when you frame it that way, it gives me another insight into how to do it. Mm-hmm. He talked more about describe different points of difference, but they all included what you just said. What happened? What did I learn? And therefore, what does it mean to you? You've almost deconstructed it a little bit more to make it a little bit more doable.
Yeah, well, that's the formula that he would give, that he gave me early on. That was the formula. Say 3 boxes. And if you get those 3 boxes, you fill those boxes, okay? Yeah. And then you have cobbled together a great story, okay? Those 3 boxes. They also create a rhythm so that when you're delivering it, much like a comedian, the person says, oh, wait a second. You've done this twice now. Here it comes. What it means to me is, and it's going to be something good, and they're on the edge of their seat, more interested in hearing what you have. So you have a formula, first of all, to make it like a recipe, doable for the individual, but then also a formula for the listener, because they say, oh. I'm hearing you say the story, but what did you learn from that? And but that's not the key thing. The more important thing is, here's what it means to you. And so those 3 boxes give you both a structure for interesting a listener, and it also gives you an easy structure or recipe, as Jason laid it out, to create your points of difference. Now, the only thing that I found helpful for me when I did it, and that I'm going to ask you to do as we go through this process now to create one point of difference, is that I found it helpful in helping other people, and it was first of all myself, was to do it backwards. In other words, that's the recipe, those three things. But everybody wants to start with, well, what has happened? What has happened? And then they start thinking, and they've got a life, and there's all these things, right? All these things
Yeah.
have happened. Is that any good, or is that any good, or is this
Yeah.
any good? Ma, 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 ma. If we start backwards, we start with what is the attribute that's desirable to the kinds of people that you're talking to, right?
Right. It's almost like you're beginning with the end in mind.
It's
So-
reverse engineering.
Right. You're going to have someone in front of you that, say it was a client that you're trying to sell on a particular program, or it's a job interview, or whatever it is. But you're trying to become relevant and credible and desirable to that person. What's that attribute? You start there.
Right. So desirable, relevant to that person, all good. So now the audience is the world, and let's not divide it anymore. It's not industry group, because as you said earlier, everybody that's in there is a person. Everybody that is in there has seen plays, listened to music, read books, and watched television. We all have so much in common in comparison to the little bitty things that differentiate us.
Right.
So we want those broad things so that it can be addressed to anybody. Starting backwards, says Bonnie, first of all, so when you think about people that you would talk to, what are attributes? What's an attribute that you would say they'd find desirable and relevant and credible? What's an attribute
So
that you would say aim towards?
So this is specific for myself, right?
Yes.
A point of difference for myself. So one of the things that when I finish client projects, or back when I was an employee, I used to, when we would wrap up a job, we would kind of do a little summary on that, or during job performance reviews, I would chat with these people about what I was doing well. Of course, areas to improve, but we're focusing on what I'm doing well here for points of difference. And often the first thing they would say was, we love how you can get things done. You're an action-oriented person who gets stuff done. One of my clients that I worked with for years and years, very senior at a huge pharmaceutical company, he used to call me the execution guru. Like, he said, if I want something done, I'll just get you to do it, even if you know nothing about that project. And that's how I worked with him for so long, because I would do one project that I knew how to do, and then he would say, we're thinking of doing this. Can you do it? And I'd be like, probably. I know how, but and then I would just figure it out. And I like doing it, and I'm good at it. And so probably, the first point of difference that I would look at developing would be around, get stuff done. It's pretty straightforward. I think an 8-year-old would understand what I meant when I said get stuff done. So can we start there? Is that okay?
No, it's a great place to start. And we'll go back to it. Let's just think about a couple of other desirable attributes to the world at large as you look at people. In other words, what you would say here would be, so that people can think about a couple of things. Not everybody is going to get stuff done, which is really a level of what we would call, as we measure personality types, conscientiousness. There's also a level of intelligence attached there. But what's another thing that people would find relevant to them, desirable to them? Anything else that you can think of?
Are you talking about specific to me here, or
just in people in general, people that you'd want to deal with? How about somebody that you'd want to deal with? If they said this is something that's unique about me and emphasize that in a good way, you'd say, oh, I like hanging around with that person.
Right. Um, I would say where they have an ability um, or a specialized ability in one area. Either it's business development, it's financial acumen, it's that they have a specialized ability somewhere. And especially if I was hiring, again, now that we're doing this, I'm thinking about when I would interview, but I was looking for that specialized ability in an area. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Am I articulating
it makes
that?
sense. So they're demonstrating a level of expertise, and you appreciate
Yes.
someone with expertness. Is how I would look at that.
Yes, you said that a lot better than I did, but yeah, that's my point. It's that they have a demonstrated expertise without being officious about it.
Right.
You know, it just is, and the more casual they are about that expertise, the more appealing it is. The more you kind of want to lean in and go, "Tell me more."
Okay. Anything else come to your mind? Honesty, really picky about delivering on deadlines, a lifelong learner, a, a, a lover of people, a giver, a caregiver. Are any other things like that strike you? Because those are some of the things I've run across in the past that people have said, this is me, this is about me. And I think people would find that desirable.
Yeah, so I think everything that you said, definitely lifelong learner, because if someone tells you they're a lifelong learner, it means all these other things too, right? It's not just I'm a lifelong learner, but I'm a lifelong learner, and it also means that I have an inquisitive mind, et cetera, et cetera. Absolutely. I like to know that people are, use this term, well-rounded, that they're interesting, and that they're interested. Whether it's travel, adventure travel, decor, motocross racing, whatever it is. I've had people talk to me about subjects that I have honestly zero interest in, like NASCAR racing, and I've been leaning forward saying, tell me more. So interesting people, caring people, caregivers. One of the best salespeople I ever worked with, he wasn't super strong technically. He wasn't a polished presenter, but he loved people. And I think you mentioned this earlier. It was impossible not to be around him and know that he just genuinely liked and cared for people. And he genuinely liked and cared for his customers. He wanted the best for them. And that came across. That was probably the most appealing thing about this individual.
Someone who's overcome adversity. There's another characteristic that people can talk about.
Yeah.
I won't belabor it. I just want to point out that I've never, and I've done this a lot, I stand up to anybody on this particular finding. Everybody's got stuff, and it is always at least three things. And those things are unique and special, and they can emphasize them, and they are desirable in a person. Even that they have the ability to come back from adversity.
Oh my gosh, that's
another
yeah.
great thing. And
absolutely.
So it's really just a matter of talking to people and thinking about it and drawing it out. But what makes it special and unique is going to be not only the element, because these elements exist, but the fact that you brought them up and that you will describe them in such a compelling way. So I just want anybody that's listening, there's only 6 people that are going to be allowed to listen to this. I just want you folks that are listening to this to understand something.
The crowds, the hordes that are listening to this.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. This is a competitive advantage. The more you blab it, the less it's an advantage, because somebody will just mess it up. You have these things, and there are these things that are stupendous. It's no doubt. Never had a problem. I guarantee you we'll spend the time on it to find them, and you'll end up agreeing with me, but these things happen. So you want to think about the world at large. You want to think about what they would find desirable and what you find desirable in terms of what you, I'd love them to know this about me. I'd like them to know these three things exist about me, and that's the way that it goes. So with that in mind, as you said, the one thing that you got, and this is a very good way of finding things, is to listen to others, to see what makes their little eyes light up, what sparks their attention, what they feed back to you of. I could even throw something at you that you don't have any expertise at, and I would too, by the way, throw that at you, because I know you'll get it done, and you'll get it done to my satisfaction. And that's a lot better in my mind than going out and hunting for somebody who's expressing some expertise like they've already done it a million times. No, I would rather throw it to you. You have that kind of an attitude. And you said that that's one of the things you'd like to convey to people, correct?
Yes.
As one of your points of difference.
Yes.
Okay, so working backwards, we're still going to craft the words. We don't know what they're going to be exactly yet, but working backwards, let's go to what happened. So what you're looking for in what happened, and we will shape it. So it doesn't have to come to you as a couple of notes about it. First of all, it doesn't have to come to you in complete form. Calm down, we'll shape it. Number two, this is a story. There's a rule about stories, and I'm going to share it with you right now. Don't take this the wrong way.
Okay.
Never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Okay.
So we may create true, 1000% true, but we may create a circumstance that is a mixture of four circumstances put together, because when we put those things together, we've got a great story. The story is true because it's about you. Nobody is going to say, well, actually, that was 1997, and that other thing you mentioned was 1998. And so you sort of make them sound like they happened in the same meeting, but they didn't. Stop it. Stop. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We make it interesting, we make it compelling. So
Okay.
You're going to think of the story, or maybe a group of stories, we're going to meld them together. But what story would you tell somebody about your ability to be doggedly determined, see things through, get that job done, no matter what? What would you say is a good story? What happened? That's the question you want to answer. What happened?
Okay, so I'm looking for, I probably have a handful of examples that I could use outside of business, where I could talk about loads of business programs and loads of business things, examples. But when I look at my life, there's a handful of them that I think would demonstrate that ability to get things done. Probably the most, this was a while ago, but the one that stands out the most for me was university. So, and you said I can just talk, right? I don't have, it's not fully formed. It's just, we're just throwing stuff out here. So I worked my way through university. I paid every single penny of my entire education myself. And I had a dream to become a physician. I was good at science, and I got into a very good university with a great medical school. And I was in pre-med doing a major in chemistry. I was about 2.5 years into my 4-year degree when it became obvious to me that I didn't want to be a doctor, that the day-to-day life of doctoring was not going to be one that made me happy. It was also clear to me that under no circumstances did I want to be a chemist in a lab. So I was 2.5 years into a 4-year degree of honors chemistry degree. I did not want to be a chemist in a lab, and I did not want to use this as my pre-med, which was my going in. And I had paid for everything myself, and I didn't have the luxury of, I was going to run out of money before I ran out. I didn't have the option of switching my major. I didn't have the option of dropping out and restarting. Like I didn't have that much runway ahead of me. So it was clear to me that I had to finish what I started, which was to finish this degree. And then I had to take that degree and turn it into something else, other than its originally intended, conclusion. So I think for me, that was still one of the hardest things, because I didn't have a lot of options, and I needed to persevere. I needed to be persistent and get it done. But it wasn't going to take me where I thought it was going to take me, I guess. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense to me, but I want everybody that's listening to it to note some things about this. She went on a journey through her memory and named a lot of things that occurred. If you shortcut that, you lose the ability to create a compelling story. I think you probably heard it already in things that she said. Ooh, highlight that. Ooh, collapse those two. That's good, but we can edit. You already heard that in what she had to say. You may have even said to yourself, I have a question for her, or I have a question on that. I'd like to know this. Here's my question as I listen to her. And I'm thinking story, story, story. Bonnie, was there a moment? Was it maybe at night? Was it while you were walking the quad? Were the birds singing? Was there a cloud overhead? Did it start to rain? I don't know what it was, but was there a moment where you said, in a combination of desperation, I don't want to go down this road any longer? Was there a moment like that?
Well, there were many moments like that, and I know what you're going to say is pick one and don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
I like being predictable.
Well, see, I'm listening and I'm learning. Mm-hmm. There were many moments. I think it was, but they were all similar. Those moments in between, sort of, when I was in third year. And I wanted to do everything I could to get out of what I was in. How do I get out of the exams? How do I get out of the labs? How do I not be here? How do I not have to do what I know I have to do to get this done? So I would have to think of a moment that I could repeat, mm-hmm. and that I could share, and that had the most magic, if I'm hearing you correctly, the most magic.
Yeah, and part of that magic is going to be in what you decide to spotlight in that. You just mentioned a couple of things. You said, well, it was the level of work that had to be done. There was the complexity of the subject matter that was that struck me. There was the need to perform on an exam. What you're trying to do when you're telling a story like this is you're going to just pick out a couple of little specifics. Those specifics will tell people two things. First of all, they're going to have them paint a picture. They're going to see you in their mind going through it. That makes a story stick if they can see it in their mind. Okay, so that's one of the reasons for that. The second reason is because that conveys the emotional elements of what it is that led you to your conclusion. Now, we're not going to belabor it. We're just looking for a little bit there because you're going to jump to what you learned from that really fast. We're going to move the story along at a speed that no clergyman would ever recognize. And no high school principal would ever recognize the speed that we're going. They'd say, well, let's stretch it out. No. We're going to start as close. That's what Vonnegut said. Start as close to the end as possible. Vonnegut. Okay. He didn't say figure out how to take 300 pages to say a page worth of stuff. If you got a page worth of stuff, get it over with. Start as close to the end as possible. So we're going to do all of those things, but we want a certain level of detail so that they can see a picture in their head, so that we can put you in that circumstance of the dilemma. That's what we're going to look towards. So yes, but you gave us clues towards that, and we can edit towards that. And what people are going to see later on is they're going to see actually the final product, not all the work in between. But if we are right now at that, you've got a really good idea of where it happened and what kind of an example we can look for and how we can telescope it down to a quick vignette that illustrates the point that it taught you what? What did you learn from that? From going through that?
From that experience?
Yeah.
I learned that first of all, I learned that I could persevere, that I was capable of more than I even realized, because I had no choice. I loved what you said earlier, which is find that little example, because I don't know which one I would choose, but all of them had the same. It was, I didn't want to be in the lab, or I didn't want to be studying quantum mechanics all night, or whatever it was. I had this sense of being trapped. And yet I continued to persevere to get to where I needed to. And I think everyone would understand, as you said, you paint a picture of feeling trapped, and the picture of that emotional anguish of how to oh my gosh, this is an awful situation to be in. And I also learned, so I learned that I could push through that, push past that, but also that everything passes, right? That this too shall pass. And you can pass, and with grace, or it can be really ugly.
And so to summarize and to look at that for what you learned.
I'm kind of struggling, to articulate it.
You said it, and again, if you're noting this and you're thinking about this and you're thinking about yourself, note how quickly the words came that would compel someone right at the beginning of what she was saying. I found I could persevere. I found I could persevere. I could overcome. And then I found something more. I found I liked it. I liked taking anything that looked incredibly hard to me at that moment, and I could just do it. But what that means to you is what? What does it mean to them?
As the listener, as the audience, as the client?
No, you're going to say the conclusion to them. What that means to you, audience, person, business person I'm delivering my point of difference to is what? What does that mean to them? I know what it means to me. I liked it. But what that means to you is?
What that means to you is that I'm going to work incredibly hard to help you cross the finish line with whatever goal we decide together.
Okay.
I'm going to be able to get you where you want to go, or get your business where you want to go, or get this project where we want it to go. And you have that commitment and perseverance from me, and I have a demonstrated ability to be able to do that.
Okay. Now, what would you like to do with what she just said? I'd like to edit it down into as few words as possible. And she said, I'm going to get you, what did you say again? Where you want to go?
Get you where you want to go. Like because we're just brainstorming
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
right? We're learning,
yeah.
and I'm taking notes a little bit on the side as we're talking.
That's fine.
But,
Good.
I think what I said was, I'm going to say it's a client, just so I can, have a picture in my mind. But say I was talking to a client, and I would say, tell this quick story, and then, but what that means to you, Mr. Potential Client, is that I'm going to be able to get you where you want to go, or get your business where you want to go, or get this project where we need it to go.
Yeah, I'll never quit. I'll get you where, or I'll get it done.
Or your business want to go or get it done.
Right. So again, notes to people who are looking at this and saying, okay, how do I craft this? You're going to take that entire word salad of all those things and go ahead and have a paragraph full of stuff. I'm not sure what they are. And then we will pull it down into 3, 4, 5 words that quickly communicate, that quickly get the point across, that make it clear. They don't have to be perfect sentences. They can be fragments. They just have to have a perfect thought expressed by them. And you want to make it as short and sweet as you can so that you can keep yourself to your time limit. And you can also, by that process, make it that much more impactful. They may think of other things that they want to add to it, but you will add no extra words. You will add no extra thought, but the core thought expressed as concisely as you can possibly do it with the strongest possible language we can use that makes the point get across. And that comes from editing. You write it out, you scope it out, you think of those different things, and then you walk away, you come back, you reconsider, and you say, these are the 3, 4, 5, or even one word. What that means to you is one word. It can be one word, it could be 3. It will not be 13, and it will not be 25. That's the clergyman. That's the principal. That's the bureaucrat. That's the television host who's in love with their own voice. You are the storyteller, and you're going to get it down to where it has the absolute most impact, the fewest number of words that get you where you want to go. And that's your point of difference.
So what my brain was just firing when you were saying this, but again, this ability to paint a picture and at the same time create some kind of an emotional response, where people get the emotion of it. So I think if I understand you correctly, I have to flush this out so I know what that story is that's going to paint the picture and create the emotional response out of all this pile of information I just gave you, and then edit, which I think reinforces your earlier point, which is that why we don't ad lib, because we put so much work into making sure that every word creates a picture, every word is strong enough or evocative enough.
And not any of the bad stuff. Every word is not a bad one, and it's all the good ones.
Yeah. Yes. So why would you ad lib? Right? You're better off. Like, I mean, once I get to this, I'm going to just commit it to memory and say it over and over again so that it just flows and it is authentic. I mean, one of the things that I'm incapable of, like truly incapable of, is selling anything that I don't believe in. So I have this deep passion for whatever it is that I'm selling, whatever it is that I'm working on. I get 150% behind it. So I feel for me that I could commit these points of difference to memory in a way and then convey them in a way that's very authentic. And I don't even have to think about ad-libbing because everything would be created so authentically that it's just about the delivery. And I actually love this. Like I'm so excited and fired up about working on fleshing out these 3 or maybe 4 points of difference. You gave me a lot to think about earlier too with the questions about other types of points of difference.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
just,
Well, that's good because once, here's the way that it will work for you and anybody else who's I've delivered or that we've shared this with, and it's only a few people. Here's the way it's going to work. You're going to struggle. It's hard to do numbers.
I've got that part down already. So we're good there. Thank you. All done. Check. Done.
It's going to take the time. Number 2, straighter arrow, faster, better, easier. Not easy though. Number 3, better still. And by the time you get through 1, 2, and 3, you may decide that you need a 4th one, or you may have already developed a 4th one, and that's the way that it rolled out. But you are going to say, no, these are the powerful ones. We're going to test them with people. We're going to see what makes their little eyes light up, what makes them check their watch and maybe roll their eyes. Those are things we're going to get rid of. It's done through practice, but it's going to get easier. And here's the real secret. Once you learn how to do this with your own personal points of difference, then we can move on. Team points of difference, division points of difference, corporate points of difference.
Right.
And in this, a point I want to get across to a large group of people about a concept that is difficult to gain their buy-in on. How will I do that? Oh my God. Here's what happened. Here's what I learned from that. But that's not important, because what's important is here's what it means to you. And under that structure, you have the ability to communicate I can't think of the business concept that you can't communicate under that structure and make interesting and relevant and desirable and actionable. I can't think of it. So starting here, difficult, but the big payoff comes that you're going to ultimately be able to communicate everything. And that's why we're going to do a series on this. We're going to do more thoughts. We're going to do more of it. Our next step, Bonnie, I think, should be you, and by the way, I'm looking at the time, a significantly shorter version of this. Gosh, I wish, I'm going to double check and see what kind of editing I can do, if there's anything. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but
people can skip through it.
They can skip through it. That's right. Here's the thing. We'll do some work offline, and you'll do some work offline, and then we'll put the pieces together, address it, and then you'll do a run through and you'll have it. And at the same time, I'll do one of my own and we'll go through that. And it will simply be some examples that other people can say, okay, I have a picture in my head of what you're talking about. That's why we're doing this, is so that you can have pictures in your head of how to do it, and it can make sense and you can get it done. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. Honestly, okay. That sounds awesome. I have a kind of a question and then another. So I have the first is that, and as we were working through this, I noted that my point of difference that I told you was get stuff done. But my story also, I could have also said perseverance, right? So it also conveyed that I have the ability to persist or to push through. It seems to me that this point of difference has multiple benefits to the listener potentially.
Well, that's a great story that has it paints a picture that they can draw many conclusions from, but you don't belabor it by saying, now what you can draw from that is, and let me spend a half an hour listing them all off for you in my awesomeness. They say, oh, no, 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 this is good for that, but also look how she's this way, and look, and that also means this and that and the other thing. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we choose, I've chosen to highlight. So I took the story and then I've chosen, or sorry, I started with the end in mind, which was get stuff done.
Yeah.
Then I picked the story. The story could also demonstrate perseverance. It could demonstrate other things. We'll let them come to that realization on their own, right? We'll only say what that means to you is that, whatever the language I choose, but what that means to you is that I can take you where you want to go, or I can take your business where it wants to go, or whatever that is. We don't pull out any of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't quit.
I don't quit.
We don't pull out any of those other pieces. But that story, there's built into that a few other things, right? Yeah.
And that's just a happy circumstance that comes out of it. That's right. But we have to drive straight. You like your hockey one? We have to skate straight to the net.
Okay.
Right. We're not, if we do that with enough momentum, people will get out of the way. So, and I will drive that, and you will see me coming if you're the goalkeeper, and you'll say, ugh, what's happening here? I'm good. This is going to be terrible. Here he comes. Here she comes. And so, yeah, we're going to go straight to the net, and we're going to eliminate all distraction because we want it to be memorable, and that means we don't fill it with a lot of other gobbledygook.
But to that example, just building on the hockey.
Yeah, we'll talk hockey. We know we're talking. And then later on, we'll talk, what's the Indian favorite is?
Cricket?
Cricket, yeah.
That game that could go on.
We won't talk baseball. We won't talk football. We'll talk something for everybody, but go ahead. Yes.
But in that example, you could say, you could be skater going for the net. You could be highlighting skating ability. You could be highlighting shooting ability. Like there's a whole, and you're only going to pick one thing. What that means for you is this, that I can shoot and hit the target, but the listener will, in their own mind, still realize the other benefits, right?
Yeah, they're going to see strength. They're going to see power. They're going to see speed. They're going to see a lot of things. Yeah. You didn't bring it up. And again, it's just part of that. Every picture is worth 1,000 words. We don't want to use 1,000 words. That's what the tedious people do.
And that's what the benefit of using a picture or a story, which is like a word picture, right? Okay,
they can see it in their head, and they draw lots of conclusions. So there you go.
Love it, love it, love it. And then my second question is, as I'm working on this, am I starting with one and working this one all the way to the end and kind of refining it? Or am I picking three and doing 3 drafts and 3, what do you call them, word salads? And then refining all 3 together? Like, I'm just trying to think of process. Am I better off to start with one and work it from beginning to end? And then a second beginning? Okay.
Yeah. Now, again, thoughts may occur. You're not going to stop. You have to let your mind flow freely. Thoughts may occur. Make a note. But we have to have a disciplined approach to it, because that's where you're going to see the structure of how to do it is going to become evident, because you're going to say, the thinking process that I went through was I let myself just say all these words and go on and on and on, and actually start to bore myself. And then I realized what the 3 words were that were going to grab them by the throat and just really make them listen.
Got it.
And
okay.
You're only going to do that by going through it. So we'll go through through the first one. We'll work on some things offline, and we will come back with either, depending on your schedule, either just the first one, or better yet, all 3. But start with one, and it will make the others much, much, much easier.
Okay. And I'd like to actually work through all 3 or 4. I think what you said earlier, because I was thinking about this only from a business relevant perspective. But the beauty of 3 is that you could do 2 that are more directly business and one that sort of touched more on the person, people as people.
Yeah,
Um,
that
and
works
that
for me.
and that presents, that presents a comprehensive picture, I think, to the listener. But it has to be authentic, because whether you're selling yourself in a job interview or to a client for a project, you have to be able to deliver on that. Like, it has to be true. What all we're trying to do is make it as compelling as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And we're going to we're going to work on this in such a way that we draw the lessons from the people who really get their point across to us and that we find great and admirable and we want to duplicate it. And we're also going to learn the lessons of what not to do to the people that make our eyes roll, that we think sound fake, that we think are tedious to an nth degree, to the person who is pompous, to the person who's a pontificator, to all of these things that everybody, no matter what level of education they're at, they all find these things so enormously off-putting. So we're going to eliminate that stuff through checking our words with other people that can say this would be a better way to go, knowing that we're trying to drive towards 100% authenticity. And then I really like what you said there in terms of the in terms of the concept of, we'll have a couple of business-oriented things, but I want to have something that's universal and people and strong and emotional in that arena, because everybody I talk to is a person, and I'm not going to lose sight of the fact that this is all about communicating with people and recognizing the humanity of that person and reaching to that to get our message across. So I think all that's good. And while we have spent probably 90 minutes going over all of this,
Oh my gosh.
I know, but at the same time, that's what it takes.
Fast is slow, or slow is fast. Isn't that what it is? Slow is fast. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And what we do, we don't want to be hasty. We don't want to leave it unsaid. We don't want to leave it undone. We don't want to belabor it, but at the same time, we want to give somebody all the information that we can, that is relevant from our experience. And that's why we go over all of these things. When it really comes right down to it, how long are your points of difference going to be? All three of them.
To say the whole thing?
Yeah. What would you shoot towards? If you wanted to say, I don't want even there to be the slightest chance that somebody's going to be bored.
3 minutes, one each. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, there isn't a right answer.
It can't be more than 3 minutes, though. I'm thinking probably less.
It might be able to be 5. It won't be 15.
Oh, no. But it
Won't be 9.
Well, I was thinking back to the summit.
Yeah.
And the intro, and I think we were instructed to keep our intros to 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think so. I think you might have said 3. Yeah.
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 And so, again, we are aiming towards really short, really quick. One of them could take 90 seconds. Another one could take 30. They're not equal.
Right.
But whatever they are all the things that we were looking for. They establish credibility, they're relevant, and most importantly, they make you sound unique and desirable.
Oh, unique. Yes, that's another thing.
Well, just your expression of it is going to be, because there are other people who would say, well, I'm very conscientious.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, great. What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? That sort of thing. What's going to make you sound unique is not only that you bring that up, but you drive it home. You tell a story. It's fascinating and it's compelling and it's all those other things. Yeah, it's a human trait. There, 10% of all humans may have it. Big deal. They say it in a tedious and boring and uncompelling way, and you don't.
Right.
That's going to be the uniqueness.
And I think it comes back to the 3 boxes, right? If you
Gotta get a
fill them,
haircut.
right?
This
This is pandemic hair.
This is pandemic hair. This is really bad. Thanks.
Well, it was better
Just,
before you did that.
well, it was feeling like it was stuck to my head. I needed some air. I don't know what's going on. There's too much hair.
Oh
Of course,
my
it could be
God.
worse. There could be too little hair.
Yes, apparently that's a bigger problem for men.
Okay.
Well,
Well, thank you all.